Hi, I'm Marshall Brown. Welcome back to Water Matters. Report cards can either be a source of pride or embarrassment. They're great if you're doing well, and not so great if you're having trouble. Last fall, an organization called Save the Sound issued a report card for the water in Long Island Sound, and the news was good for some communities on Long Island, and not so good for others. On this edition of Water Matters, we're delighted to welcome Curt Johnson, the Executive Director of the Connecticut Fund for the Environment's Save the Sound program, which produced the report card. Curt is an experienced environmental attorney and has been with Save the Sound since 1993. Here now is Curt Johnson.
Thank you, Marshall. I really appreciate being here from Save the Sound, and I think it's important for your audience and for all the folks listening to realize how far we've come in Long Island Sound. I like to think of it as an arc of healing that's going on out there, and it's been going on for years. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about how far we've come, but the major challenges. And one of the things that's important to realize about the Sound is that of all the water bodies in the United States, it is our most urbanized estuary. In other words, a place where salt and fresh water mix, where the rivers come down to meet the sea. It is our most urbanized area. So we're kind of involved in an international experiment to see how much recovery, how many fish can come back, how clean the water can be. And as a result, Marshall, one of the things that we were asked to do this fall is coordinate with our National Estuary Program and many, many people, scientists, and put out a very simple report card on Long Island Sound's water quality. And what you're looking at right now is the basic bottom line results from that, which show as you move from New York City, which unfortunately gets an F, out all the way to the race, if you're thinking about Long Island, all the way out to Orient Point, which gets an A, you see that the grades are quite varied there. And what that tells us is that the Western Sound, we're right here on Manhasset Bay, which is part of the Western Sound, is the most impacted by our pollution. Now again, I want to point out from this picture, it's a little deceptive. We're only talking about the center water of Long Island Sound, and we're talking about the ecological health of that water. How much oxygen is in that water? How much murky algae is there floating? Things like that. It's just a quick view of how we're doing. And we're going to talk about why that's important right now. And I want to say that the bays and harbors are quite different than the Central Sound. And we're going to talk about one of those bays in a few minutes. But why do we care about water conditions and what's happening? It's because in the bays and harbors, we have, as this picture illustrated on the left side, a healthy condition of a bay and harbor with a lot of things we love. Scallops and mussels and clams and healthy tiny, tiny plants called phytoplankton and zooplankton, and all the healthy things that live with that, marshes, etc. And on the right side, what we see is what can happen when there's too much nitrogen and the ecological conditions deteriorate. So you get types of brown tide that is not only makes the water murky and very unpleasant to swim in, but can actually make it toxic. And that has happened in the past in Northport Harbor out here. So, and dead clams and dead oysters and all the rest of it. So that's really what's at stake. And it's very important that we continue to build up the healing power of Long Island Sound. This is just a quick shot of dissolved oxygen in the Sound, how much, again, in the Central Sound has been there over years and years. And when I say the Central Sound, I mean out in the deep waters of the Sound. And as you can see, the red means danger here. The red means low oxygen conditions. Again, that's in the Western Sound. It's just once you move outside the bays and harbors here, you have low oxygen conditions. What we're starting to see, the good news is that we made an investment in the Sound. The sewage plants all around the Sound have reduced their nitrogen inputs by 60% over the last 20 years. It was a big effort. It required the power of the Clean Water Act. It required the power of cooperation between two states, New York and Connecticut. It required all of our towns to step up and make that investment. It required investments by the state of New York and the state of Connecticut. But we're starting to see some improvements. These investments do pay off. Finally, I'm just going to talk about how nitrogen feeds too much algae. And this is an image that's put together by one of the scientists who I believe has been on your show. And what it indicates on Long Island is how many different problems can occur. So again, we have the low oxygen problem, which can be cause murky conditions out in the Sound. We see in the various bays here low oxygen problems that have been identified, including here in Port Washington and in Northport Harbor. We see in Peconic Bay, out and around, where there was a serious problem in the summer of 2015 with red and brown tides, which are toxic. And we see problems on the South Shore as well. And very quickly, this is what a rust tide looks like. It's what happened in Peconic Bay in May of 2015. It makes that water toxic. It pollutes and causes actually the shellfish there to become poisonous. As a result of all of this, it sucks the oxygen out of the water and it kills fish. And this is an image of thousands and thousands of fish that died in May and June of 2015 out in Peconic Bay. These are the issues that we need to turn around. We are starting to turn around. We last summer did not see these kinds of problems to this extent in Long Island Sound, which is a good thing. Unfortunately, again, because of those very toxic shellfish, mussels, clams, barnacles, things like that, that's exactly what these turtles, terrapin turtles, feed on. They became poisoned. They died. There's an estimate that over 100 of them died. Which you say, oh, 100 turtles, what's the big deal? These turtles are so important to that marshland ecosystem. They're beautiful. They've been here for thousands of years. We certainly want to protect them and conserve them into the future. So let's talk about some of the actions that are going on to reduce nitrogen in our bays and harbors to continue this arc of healing I was talking about. Save the Sound, not just by ourselves, but with some of your friends that you've already had on the show. We filed the petition with EPA in February of 2015. EPA responded just a year ago, Christmas time. They issued a response, in effect, which was a strategy to reduce nitrogen inputs in our bays and harbors. Also in the East River, again, remember that slide I showed of how red and what a big F the New York City area received in that report card. And the point of that is that EPA is saying, New York City, you've done some good things, but we need to do more. And also at the three major tributaries which come in Connecticut, as you know, Marshall, we have the Connecticut River, the Thames River, and the Housatonic, three big systems. 90% of our fresh water come into Long Island Sound through those systems. We need to do more to turn off the tap of nitrogen there. And I want to give your DEC and your Governor Cuomo a lot of credit because they have come out with their own Long Island Sound, nitrogen action plan, which calls again on the bays and harbors here in Long Island as well as on the South Shore of Long Island to be looking at what are the sources. Let's set some endpoints. What do we want to protect here? Certainly on Long Island, we want to protect our marshes, which are so important not only to the turtles and all the fish and all the wildlife, but also they form barriers or really sponges that absorb coastal floods, which we're having an increased frequency due to climate change. So they're becoming increasingly important as sponges between our neighborhoods and our seafront. Very, very important, and that's one of the things that can be protected by reducing nitrogen, because nitrogen is over-fertilizing those marshes and killing them. That's just one of the many endpoints that we need to get to. So I think with that, I'm now going to talk for just a moment about a particular bay in your area, which is Little Neck Bay, which has been a little bit of a stepchild of the clean water effort out here, in a bay that needs help. One of the things we were able to do this summer is to start collaborating with one of your great partners out here on Long Island, which is the Manhasset Bay Protection Committee, and start working with them to gather their data with them and take a look at what are the conditions in the bays and harbors. And the questions are, what's in the water, where's it coming from, and how do we fix it? So those are the main points. And I'm just going to move on to how we focused, particularly on Little Neck Bay, which is right next to Manhasset, and why we took a look at it. And we have a tool that's called Sound Health Explorer. Save the Sound has produced this. If you want to go to it, just type in Sound Health Explorer and it will pop up. And what it does is it tells you the health of your beaches. Health from a point of view of bacterial levels. As you probably know, lots of bacteria from sewage in the water can make people sick. So this describes for each beach, over 200 around Long Island Sound, what the conditions are at their beaches from a bacterial point of view. And it's color-coded. And what you're seeing right here is a real zoom in on Little Neck Bay. And if you look down here, this is the Douglaston Manor Beach, and it's got a big red, which means it's in terrible shape. It means it's failing in our grading system. So we wanted to know a little bit more about what was going on there. And that, what we're seeing is that it's failing that safe swimming standard that EPA and the state of New York has adopted over a quarter of the time, which is really not acceptable. Over a quarter of the time. In other words, if you go swimming 4 days out there, it's likely that one out of those times that you go swimming, you're going to be swimming in unsafe waters. It's a probability. This is percentage-wise. So what we did is look at two different things. One was the bacterial conditions in the bay, and the second one was starting to look at the ecological conditions in the bay. What I'm excited about that ecological look, which goes back to nitrogen, and what kind of conditions, oxygen, murky water from algae, big vats of large seaweed on the bottom, these kinds of indicators, what I'm most excited about is the protocol that we developed with scientists is a common protocol that now we are sharing with about 15 groups around Long Island Sound. This is so exciting that we're developing a cadre of what I'm calling really bay doctors who are going to be committed to looking at their individual bay, but looking at it with the same diagnostic tools, just the way that doctors use the same diagnostic tools for every patient. We need to do that in our bays and harbors. And then we're going to have a baseline of health, right? And we'll find that some bays are doing better than others, and others are having problems. And we're going to talk right now about a bay that has particular problems. And what you're looking at right now is the way in which we did our sampling for this unified water study last summer for the first time, both in Little Neck Bay, which is on the left, and in Manhasset Bay on the right. And I can tell you that one of the findings was that unfortunately we found conditions with murky water caused by too much algae blooming in the water due to too much nitrogen. It's like too much of a good thing. The fertilizer sets off a bloom. And then the second thing we found is when that algae, again, is dying, it sucks the oxygen out of the water. So early in the morning, we found low oxygen conditions in both bays at various times. When it came to bacteria, again, back to swimming, being able to boat, being able to kayak safely without getting sick, what we are seeing here is a comparison of Little Neck, which is down to the left, and Manhasset up at the right. And I think what this shows is what a great job the Manhasset Protection Committee has been doing over the years, because you'll notice that the vast majority of the sampling locations that they took and we took are showing green, which is very good water quality conditions, low bacteria. Unfortunately, if you look at Little Neck Bay, which has been a bit ignored in the water quality, world out here, you're seeing several, well, I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 locations with red dots. Those red dots mean the water quality is pretty awful. So there's a number of things we need to do. We need to be working with our DEC. We need to be working with the towns. But Little Neck Bay needs help, is what it amounts to. And both of these bays need help from a nitrogen point of view so that our marshes can be healthy, so the water is less murky, so that we see our fish being able to breathe well again, and we won't have fish kills in our harbors.
Everyone wants a nice-looking lawn, and everyone wants clean water to drink and safe water for swimming, boating, and fishing. But chemical pesticides and high nitrogen fertilizers are contaminating our drinking water and contributing to fish kills and algal blooms in our bays, rivers, and streams. The good news is you can have a great-looking lawn without those harmful products. Most garden centers carry non-toxic lawn products, and many of Long Island's top landscape contractors offer natural lawn care services that make your property look great and protect our water at the same time. So, if you love Long Island, join the campaign to keep our waters clean. Go to ilovelongisland.org, take the pledge, get your lawn sign, and show your neighbors you care about the health and safety of the place we call home. ilovelongisland.org.
Hi, I'm Sean O'Neill, the Peconic Bay keeper. I'm also an environmental economist. I'd like to talk today about dollars and cents and the current water quality improvement strategies proposed for Long Island. As all viewers of this program know, we have a serious water quality issue on Long Island, both with our sole source drinking water aquifer system and our fragile coastal ecosystems. The gravity of this problem is finally being recognized by our elected officials, and while awareness of the issue and planning to fix the problem are both good initial steps, we need strong, sound policy implementation along with cutting-edge technology to solve our water crisis. As an environmental economist, I look at the negative environmental impacts as what we call externality costs. Externalities are the unintended consequence of a commercial activity that affect other parties while not being reflected in the cost of the goods or services involved. When negative environmental externalities are identified, it has typically been the job of good government to step in and get the producers to pay the true cost of production for whatever good or service is being produced. The degradation of Long Island's ground and surface waters is an externality cost of rapid development and the regulatory failure of wastewater infrastructure that cannot keep up with the pace of change. It is a cost that has been borne first by some of our most iconic industries, such as the rapid demise of our fishing and shellfishing industries, which today are a shadow of their former prominence. We see it in the hundreds of bacteria-driven beach closures we witness every summer, the closure of shellfish grounds, the inability of our residents to use our beaches due to harmful algal blooms and the drying up of streams and creeks. It has led to costly drinking water remediation, with more to come in the future. All Long Islanders have borne this cost in some way, without a share of the benefit that developers have received from increased density. To their credit, government entities such as the Suffolk County Executive's Office, Suffolk County Department of Health Services, and the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation have looked to mitigate some of these concerns. Technological solutions being considered revolve around the implementation of new technologies to reduce the amount of nitrogen and wastewater produced by over 360,000 existing on-site septic and cesspool systems. Unfortunately, none of the plans being considered contain regulatory controls to lower the overall nitrogen loads into our ground and surface waters. In fact, Current proposals would continue to allow non-conforming wastewater loads to be produced on parcels developed before current sanitary code rules took effect, and extend these practices to other parcels to be developed as well. Simply mandating new technology on new construction does nothing to improve our current loads, which have led to the water quality crisis we are in today. Reduced new loads, while reduced, are still new loads. The proposed solution to these problems involves a water tax on usage to create a recurring allotment of $75 to $100 million annually. This begs the question, if money was the answer to our water quality issues, why is the over $4 billion spent on water quality through drinking water protection funds and the East End Community Preservation Funds led us to our bad and getting worse state of water quality? The answer to that question is money alone, without regulatory controls that mandate actual reduction in loads, does nothing to improve water quality. Spending money on new technology without addressing the fundamental causes of our water quality issues is not progress. Making taxpayers once again pay for an externality they did not create nor share in the profits of is not equitable. The low-hanging fruit is obvious. No new loads over current levels. Remediation of existing wastewater loads needs to occur to ensure no new harm is caused by the implementation of new wastewater treatment technologies. If we allow new systems to be subsidized with taxpayer money without mandating any remediation of existing loads, we'll create a system that incentivizes new, taxpayer-subsidized development with no reduction in overall nitrogen loads. If the costs of these new septic systems are subsidized with public funds, there is no incentive for developers to pick the cheapest option, and artificially high costs for these systems can be maintained. By mandating in-kind remediation of existing loads as a prerequisite to creating new loads, developers are incentivized to use the best possible technology. Wastewater manufacturers are encouraged to deliver their product at the lowest possible prices. The pace of system installation would increase, along with business opportunities for local installers of these systems, all while costing the taxpayer $0. The cost of these systems and the externality cost of water pollution would be captured in the price of development itself and no longer passed on to the residents of Long Island. This would provide incentives to the developer to produce the smallest load possible with the cheapest system possible on the new development to lower the cost of mitigating loads elsewhere. The current policies certainly make a lot of dollars for those entities supporting, designing, and implementing them, but don't make a whole lot of sense for the taxpayers of Long Island.
The views expressed on the Soapbox are not necessarily those of Water Matters, its sponsors, hosts, guests, or underwriters. If you'd like to stand on the Water Matters Soapbox and sound off about a water issue, send your script to soapbox@liwater.org.
If you get sick, your doctor may give you medicine, and you might have some left over when you get better. So what do you do with it? Here's what. Don't ever, ever flush drugs down the drain, because we're beginning to find them in our water here on Long Island. See, whatever goes down the drain ends up in our drinking water or in our bays and streams. So jump in and help keep Long Island's water clean. Don't flush medicines down the drain. Learn more at liwater.org.
Welcome back to Water Matters. I have here Curt Johnson, Executive Director of Save the Sound. Welcome to the show, and
Well, it's
thank you
great to
for
be here.
a wonderful presentation, very informative. I love what you're doing. Could you describe for us the amount of progress that's been made over the last 20, 25 years or so with the sound? I mean, we look at that and we're very envious.
Yeah. Well, I think the progress is on several different levels. And we probably should start with sewage treatment plants as a big thing. I'm now going back decades. When I was in high school, I visited a sewage treatment plant in New Haven. And all it did was settle out the worst of the sewage and treat it like heck with chlorine. That was it. So the water came out that was gray and disgusting. Now, the treatment plants, after they received their most recent upgrade, and virtually every sewage treatment plant around Long Island Sound has received that upgrade. Everyone on Long Island, everyone in Queens, everyone in New York City, everyone in Westchester, most of them in Connecticut. The difference is just astounding. at how well they perform. They're now stripping nitrogen out of the water, 60% of it. They're removing, 95, 98% of the solids. The effluent, I would never drink it, but it looks quite clear. So we have made tremendous strides, and what we're starting to see is, again, in the Western Sound, the oxygen, it appears over the last 5 years as a trend where the oxygen is starting to come back again. And it's the same time frame that all of the Long Island sewage treatment plant upgrades have occurred. Just this past summer, the New York City upgrades have occurred. So we're starting to see this change. At the same time, though, Marshall, what we're seeing and we're learning more about is that in some of our bays and harbors, we have serious, serious problems that have to be dealt with. And as I mentioned before, when you look at the report card, because there's so many people in the Western Sound, because the Western Sound borders on New York City, because the East River flows out of New York City, we still have water quality conditions that objectively are ranked at an F. And, as you move out, they get better. But we have a distance to go. But it's exciting to be thinking about how far we can come and how far we have come.
So that dead zone, if you will,
Yeah.
that anoxic
Yeah.
area in the very western part of the Sound, that's been shrinking.
That has been, now, each year it varies a lot due to weather. I can talk about that a little bit more. We are worried because of the predictions and the experience we've had with climatic change is working against recovery. Wind conditions are changing, precipitation conditions are changing, those kinds of things, temperatures. But having said that, if you look at the last 7 years, say, and you look at the general trend, while there's bouncing around, the area of low oxygen is generally going down, and that is very much correlated with the nitrogen reduction upgrades that have occurred at these sewage treatment plants. So that's very, very important.
Well, you still have, of course, on Long Island, chiefly, if not exclusively, hundreds of thousands of cesspools and septic tanks. The 30 towns on the North Shore of Nassau County, there are 30 that have no sewering.
Yep.
To what extent is that even quantifiable, the amount of nitrogen that's causing to come into the Sound?
Yeah, it is, and actually that's something that a scientist from University of Connecticut and also scientists from Stony Brook have coordinated on and have done some rough modeling, and it does show in many areas of Long Island that septics are a major, major source of nitrogen. You've heard your county executive out in Suffolk say that nitrogen is public enemy number one. It's his highest priority. I really give him a lot of credit for taking the political leadership on this. And I guess the good news, Marshall, is that the costs of retrofitting septic systems and dealing with nitrogen on a community level are starting to go down. And the good news is that the state of New York now has some funding to help neighborhoods like that put in improved septic treatment on a community basis. And we would love to see the neighborhood and the villages sort of take New York State up on that funding and start doing some neighborhood scale septic improvements. The good news is that the state of New York has funded a series of innovative installations of septic improvements, septic retrofits. And that analysis is going on right now, but there's some very promising technologies out there to deal with this.
You're speaking of the Clean Water Tech Incubator at Stony Brook, the 19 systems that they're testing from the 6 manufacturers.
Exactly.
And we've had a couple qualified already, and that would be how we would deal with the hundreds of thousands of cesspools and septic tanks. The problem remains financial, however, because while the price is going down with volume and innovation, it's still according to IBM Smarter Cities, a $10 billion problem in Suffolk alone to deal with all these systems, whether it's sewering or on-site systems. Nassau, we need to get them to the same place Suffolk is, but nonetheless, there's still, if there are 360,000 cesspools and septic tanks in Suffolk, there's 140,000 in Nassau, and a lot of them are along the Sound.
Sure.
So if we could find some vehicle by which these could be, paid off over 30 years or however, then it would make an enormous difference to the Sound.
Absolutely, and I just want to say that we have experienced in the environmental pollution arena enormous cost reductions to various technologies. These are relatively new technologies. They're also not mass-produced technologies yet. So what our experience has been from everything from catalytic converters on our automobiles to pollution scrubbers on our big power plants is that those costs go down as we develop the technology. So that's one piece of good news. I couldn't agree with you more. We need to come up with an investment structure so that people can pay these things off long term. And what we also should realize is that out on Cape Cod, they are dealing with very similar issues, lots of septics, lots of problems, and they're finding a variety of different approaches in choosing the most cost-effective ones. And they have some really interesting modeling and cost analysis out there. And certainly individual septic systems is one part of it, but there's also community systems. There's also, permeable walls that can be put down to clean up groundwater, even including, some efforts to use shellfishing and aquaculture as a way to polish the water. And in certain instances, marsh restoration will help to absorb excess nitrogen.
Exactly.
All of those things can be beneficial. And out here on Long Island, I just want to put it in a pitch for really looking seriously at marsh restoration, because I think it's something that your folks are unaware of, in part due to how much nitrogen pollution you've had out here. You have lost about 25% of your marsh area over the last 25 years, only due to so-called natural degradation. In other words, the impacts of nitrogen pollution, the impacts of sea level rise. If we need to be restoring those wetlands to their ancestral dimensions.
Well, no question about that. Professor Goldberg's work, I'm sure you're familiar with.
Sure.
90% of the marshes have been lost since 1930. A lot of that was housing, but some is environmental degradation, as you point out. And if we don't deal with this nitrogen problem, the prediction is that we will have no marshes by 2030, which have all sorts of implications for shellfishing and fisheries and, to your point, coastal resilience. I would love to see Manhasset Bay, alive with marshes.
Sure. And I think one of the things that Chris Govler can help us do is to identify the extent of those marshes. I'll just mention one project that Save the Sound's involved with very actively. We have a whole green projects team of engineers, construction managers, volunteer coordinators, and we have a major project going on at Sunken Meadow State Park. And that's, one of the great state parks in New York. It's at least way up in the top 10 of most visited parks, millions of people a year. And there's a small creek that runs into Sunken Meadow, and that had been blocked off from the Sound for decades after a causeway was put in. Storm Sandy came in and bulldozed that out of the way, which is something that had been dreamed about as a restoration project. We helped the state park system put in a bridge now instead of a causeway, which allows open flow back and forth. And we're also working with state parks to reestablish about a total of 3 to 4 acres of marshland up there that needs an extra boost, but there's another 30 or 40 acres that is naturally reestablishing itself up there.
That is true.
So it's a very exciting project. We're also looking at, an analysis of the creek to allow alewives and river herring to move up there. So it's a very exciting project.
One of our members found some alewives trying to get upstream.
Yeah, they're there still. The remnants of that population. Of course, river herring are so important. It's what every creature on Long Island Sound we love, whether it's striped bass, bluefish, ospreys, they all eat these creatures. So we need, if you build the base of the food chain, right, of the food web, then the great creatures we love, whether it's an osprey or it's a whale, will come back. And
now, that creek in Sunken Meadow, I understand that there are 9 more dams / spillways upstream.
And we're looking at those. So we've been asked to look at the Nissaquag River as well. There's a dam there that state parks would like to remove. We are starting to knit back these rivers again so that, from a fish point of view, they're continuous as they used to be hundreds of years ago. And it helps water quality so much because stagnant water that's built up behind a dam is doing really no one any good. And it helps to reconnect the rivers with the sound again.
It also helps to clean upstream. These fish fry, they go and eat everything, and then they swim out to the ocean.
Absolutely. So it's reconnecting, and it's part of that arc of healing that we all are part of. I've talked to your Long Island legislators, and what they will tell you, and they've told me, is that if they get a dozen phone calls on a topic from constituents, that's a big issue to them on a state level. I'm now talking about your state assemblymen and your state senators. So your callers, your listeners can make a big impact by just simply calling up and saying, we have got to invest, work with Governor Cuomo on this Environmental Bond Act. It will benefit Long Island.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think it really starts with people. We have some 11,000 people in Save the Great South Bay, and it's starting to make a difference in terms of our ability to have our voice heard. So
Absolutely.
I would be glad to join you in that. Let us know when that's happening.
I'll be happy to.
And from our side of the sound, we'll help you up in Connecticut. I want to thank you for
Thank
being
you
on
so
the show.
much. Thank you.
That's going to do it for this edition of Water Matters. Thanks to our guest, Curt Johnson, and to all of you who are tuning in to watch the show. We appreciate your support and look forward to working with each of you to help solve Long Island's water problems. Because here on Long Island, water matters.